Good evening and welcome to the Way Out Show. I'm your host, Dane McCarthy. Today is August the 1st, 2017. And I just got back from Detroit, Michigan. I was there for 3 days and did a little bit of a ride around town on the People Mover. Saw the town, saw where it was going, saw some of where it had been. So, yes, Detroit has come a long way from its bankruptcy and its near devastation, but it has a long way to go. The reason why I went to Detroit, because I believed that it was representative of a lot of cities in the Rust Belt, and it was possibly the template for future cities in the United States. And what I saw was a city that really was devastated, utterly devastated. Almost a war zone. But the local people that I talked to seemed optimistic that things were getting better. What they would always say was, if you go downtown, it looks great. But if you go outside of downtown, if you step across that line, it's a war zone. And they literally used that term, war zone. They talked about the ghetto. They didn't want to drive through the ghetto. They avoided it. They didn't live in the ghetto. The people I visited lived in a nearby suburb. And they didn't want to live in Detroit at all. And they wouldn't even consider it. For one thing, they said living downtown is just too expensive. Amazing, because the land is very cheap in Detroit. They were selling houses for as little as $1 not that long ago. And of course you have certain obligations. If you are willing to do that, you have to pay your taxes and you have to renovate and maintain the property up to the specifications within a certain time period to keep the city of Detroit happy. What is the recent history of Detroit? I learned a lot about it. It was quite amazing. Detroit apparently used to be the most prosperous city in the United States. And this is about maybe in the 1950s, which was really the height of the power and the glory, you could say, of Detroit, Motor City. The city on the straits between Lake Huron and Lake Erie. Quite an amazing place. What I saw was a city that had almost been completely destroyed. In the downtown area, there are little blocks or pieces of blocks where the houses, the buildings, are the original buildings. Very nice brick buildings, 19th century. Among those buildings are some of the original skyscrapers. Beautiful Art Deco buildings such as the Fisher Building. And then you have also the older buildings like the old City Hall, which is a beautiful Victorian stone structure with a cupola and has statues, and it's very decorative, very well designed. It's in a state of disrepair. And I did see some other buildings from that period that were also in a state of disrepair. And I don't know if they're going to be fixed up or torn down. They talked about building, that there was a lot of building in Detroit, downtown Detroit. I did see a little bit, not that much. So is Detroit coming back? I would say yes, and partly because the land is so cheap. And people have high hopes for the return of the powerful, bustling city that it used to be. When Detroit was in its prime, it was very prosperous. It was a manufacturing hub of the United States. During World War II, Detroit was called the Arsenal of Democracy because much of the war material that was used in World War II was made in Detroit. And they were all set up for it since they were making cars, and they just simply retooled so they could make weapons of war, tanks and trucks and jeeps and so on, which I'm sure they used, I don't know how many thousands of those and maybe airplanes too. I'm not sure if they made airplanes in Detroit, but they were maybe guns, ammunition, who knows what. But so you saw this buildup of Detroit starting in maybe the 20s or 30s, and you had Henry Ford, you had General Motors, Chrysler, and other Detroit car companies. People flocked to Detroit, and many black people flocked to Detroit for the jobs in the assembly lines, which were huge, big innovation. Henry Ford got the idea of the assembly line going and making cars as a team rather than a group of technicians or mechanics building one single car at a time. They would specialize, and each guy would only do one or two little jobs, and then the car would move on down the assembly line. I also went to the Detroit Institute of Art, the DIA, which they call it, and it is an absolutely enormous place, and a lot of good art there, if you like art. And it was really too big for the size of the town, because it's simply enormous. The population of Detroit was over 1.8 million at one point at its heyday. Now it's down to around 700,000. So it is smaller than half. And we were driving around a lot on Sunday, and it wasn't that busy. And Sunday is a slow day, but anyway, because it's Sunday. But in a place like Columbus, which is much more bustling and booming town, it's busy every day. So there was this sort of empty feeling about downtown Detroit, and it was the way that the area is coming back is piecemeal. There doesn't seem to be any definite idea of what is needed. It looks like various buildings have been plopped down. They've been designed by the architect without reference to any tradition, any building style that would be recognizable as indigenous to that town. So you have this odd hodgepodge of many of them postmodern buildings. And I've been learning a little bit about postmodern architecture, and it really is, it doesn't seem to reference traditional architecture very much, as much as I thought it would. I thought it referenced it a lot, but apparently it doesn't, from what I've been seeing. And they just seem to be representations of the whims of the architect. And each architect has his own way of designing things, and so nothing really fits together as a whole. You have a lot of empty spaces with these odd buildings plopped down in between kind of rundown 19th century rows of buildings that are just leftover chunks of what wasn't destroyed or knocked down. And we did see a huge crane which looked like it was in the process, perhaps, or just about ready to knock down several old buildings right in the heart of downtown Detroit. This is something that we're seeing a lot in some cities. I guess it's inevitable in this modern world that buildings get knocked down, old buildings, rather than saved. But I was thinking in terms of London, the same kind of thing, but on a much bigger scale. London being this enormous town. You do have a lot of things that are saved in London, but you also have a tremendous amount of buildings that seem to stick up like sore thumbs, that are again the fancy of that particular artist, that he's just been given a free rein to make something that is not at all like what the traditional London would look like. And just crazy buildings that, like there's one building called, what's it called? The top of it looks like it was actually broken off. The top deliberately looks like a ruin, like it's just cracked and broken. And I guess some people think that's beautiful, but it just doesn't make any sense in London. What is London? I mean, does that fit in with Big Ben or Tower Bridge or any of the other, Elizabethan buildings that are in London? No, it has no reference point. Probably the worst thing in London is this enormous Ferris wheel that they have, which is called the London Eye. Very strange name. And it just literally looks like something out of an amusement park. And is that fit in with the whole ambiance and the gravitas of London? No, and not at all. It's just completely and very jarring to look at this enormous Ferris wheel in the middle of London, right on the Thames River, just so people can go up and get a view of London. What's that all about? It's so funny. In Paris, when they built the Eiffel Tower, somehow they were able to get by with the Eiffel Tower, although people just freaked out when the Eiffel Tower was built. And eventually it became a symbol of Paris, and it worked. And it's all images of Paris. If you want to know that it's Paris, you have the Eiffel Tower in that picture, and you know it's Paris. So it really worked for Paris. And I think a lot of these modern architects are trying to do the same thing. And each guy wants to make his creation be the new Eiffel Tower and be the symbol of London. Well, I'm sorry, but London already has its symbol. And one of the main symbols is Big Ben. If you see Big Ben, you know it's London. So I don't know if they really should be allowed to indulge their fancy and their egos to be able to do that. Now, how does that reference Detroit? It really doesn't, except that it's a comparison. Because Detroit has the potential to be one day, decades from now, a great American city once again. The difficulty is you had a huge population of poor people. They didn't used to be poor, but since Detroit became deindustrialized, now they are. And many of them have fled, and most of them are black people. And I saw a map of lines going out from Detroit in all different directions. They've gone everywhere you can imagine in the United States because there were no more opportunities in Detroit. And if you look at the satellite maps of Detroit, you go out of the downtown area, the small area, and this huge area surrounding it, and you'll see the empty neighborhoods. It's almost spooky. Whole blocks with only one or two houses on the block, and the rest is just empty lots. And there used to be houses there. They were filled with houses, but they were the people who were there. They couldn't keep them up. They couldn't pay the taxes. They couldn't pay their mortgage or whatever. And then they just lost the house. And then it sat there empty. And then the homeless people moved in, or the crack addicts, or the heroin addicts, or the meth addicts, or the prostitutes. And then, so they worked out of there for a while, let's say, or the squatters. They were just ordinary. Then the neighbors get upset, the remaining neighbors. And when the opportunity comes, then they burn it. Because the city didn't take care of it. The city was in financial straits. It would cost money to tear down a house. So they just set, the neighbors or somebody would just set that fire alight. And particularly on Halloween night, that was when many of the fires were set, Devil's Night. And this is what one of the guys who I talked to about Detroit said, is that the fires were just all over the place on Devil's Night. Now they call, there's another night, or maybe it's the same night, Angel's Night, where people come out and they protect everything from, I guess, the people who were setting fires and try to prevent them from setting fires. This may be a sport or something, to break into houses and set them on fire, just something to do. And it's pretty extreme when you consider the value, the intrinsic value of a home that is some of the very decorative and beautiful and well-designed and well-made homes with beautiful hardwood floors and nice doors and nice trim and nice roofs and beautiful windows, and designed by maybe an architect back in the 1890s or the 1900s, early 1900s. And then, boom, it's gone. And all that is lost. And it's never coming back, because people, unless you're a multi-millionaire, can't afford nowadays to have someone design you a custom home like that, a beautiful home. That's what we're seeing in the new buildings that are going up in Detroit as well. They just don't have the style and the detail, the attention to detail, the fine stone cutting that would go into those older buildings. Is just beyond the reach or the ability of people to either execute or to pay for nowadays. And this is extremely unfortunate that this is the way it has come. I mean, we really do need to get back to decorative buildings, because it gives them a value that people feel there's an historic value, that's an aesthetic appeal that's really, it makes you want to keep that building instead of just tearing it down. I mean, that's the intent. That's the desire that people have. They see beauty, and you don't want to destroy beauty. A building that's just utilitarian, nobody cares. After it gets a little bit out of date, they just knock it down and they build another building. And it's probably just as bad or worse. And this is something that goes against the whole idea of sustainability. You can throw that out the window. It's not cheaper to build new if you compare the quality, because you're never going to get the quality that you had before. I'm not saying never, but often. So we went up to visit my girlfriend's nephew and his family. And he is in the Border Patrol. He was down in Arizona, and then he moved to the U.S.-Canada border. And he patrols in a boat, mostly on Lake Erie, I guess, and maybe the Detroit River. And they're looking for drug smugglers. He said that's the main problem on the northern border. And one of the reasons he wanted to move away from Arizona, the southern border, was because of the situation down there. It was just so difficult. And the government was not helping. Not helping. They were throwing barriers in their way. They made it almost impossible for them to do their job. They would pick up people, they would process them, they would take them back over the border, watch them actually cross over the border back into Mexico, and then the very next morning they would pick them up on the American side again. So it was just a continuous loop of the same people being deported, taken over, processed, taken over, they're back over, back down. I was just reading an article today how one guy who was a criminal, apparently a rapist, was deported 20 times from the United States, and they just kept coming back. But he said that it was better under Trump, much better, and he was thinking about moving back to Arizona. One of the worst and most egregious offenses that happened under Obama was the Fast and Furious. And I mentioned that to these border guards, these border agents. My girlfriend's nephew and his best friend, they were buddies, and they worked together in Arizona. And they said, oh yeah, Brian Terry. They knew the guy, Brian Terry. Now, if you don't remember who he was killed by a gun that was used in the Fast and Furious program. And what was the Fast and Furious program? That was a U.S. FBI undercover operation in which the idea was you get a straw buyer to buy guns from a gun shop in Arizona or Texas, and then sell those to cartels, to drug-running Mexican cartel type people, drug smugglers. And the idea was that they were going to track those guns to the cartel leaders. Except, how are you going to do that? I mean, after they cross over the border, what do you think they're going to let, the cartel members are just going to let you follow them right to their headquarters so you can bust the leaders of the cartel after they pick up their guns? No, they're not going to let you do that. There's no way. Once they get across that border, FBI, I mean, they're out of their jurisdiction, for one thing, FBI. And so the whole program was a smokescreen for attempting to frame American gun dealers to make them look like they're selling drugs to Mexican cartel drug smugglers. And to put the pressure on the Second Amendment. Put the pressure on people who want to preserve gun rights, like semi-automatic AR-15s or whatever, or handguns. And it completely backfired on them because one of those guns was used to kill border agent Brian Terry. And this became a national scandal. And so far, no one has paid any penalty for this illegal covert action. But the border guards remember, and they remembered that it was under Eric Holder and Obama. They remember very well. So when President Trump gets up and says, we're going to put a stop to this, we're going to stop these drug smugglers, we're going to put up a wall, a triple wall, they are thrilled. The border guards are thrilled because it makes their job a lot easier. Because, I mean, not only is it easier for the border guards, but it's also easier for the people who are attempting to get across to the United States. Because people die a lot trying to get into the United States. They get robbed, they get raped, they get killed. They die in the desert. It's really dangerous to be trying to cross that desert at night. And it's expensive because the smugglers who take you across the border charge a lot of money, in the thousands of dollars. And these people are not, generally speaking, wealthy people at all. That's why they're trying to flee Mexico or Honduras or Costa Rica, whatever it is, wherever it is they're from. They want those good jobs. Well, we need that secure border to protect them as well as to make the job of the border guards easier. Now, the other border, on the Canadian side, people attempting to enter the United States illegally is not really that much of an issue, according to them. But that is where a lot of drugs come in. Now, a lot of drugs, they said it's nothing compared to the amount of drugs, though, that come in through the Mexican side. That's where most of the drugs come in. And it's extremely dangerous. They knew men personally who died doing their jobs as border guards on the Arizona border. Run over by drug dealers' cars. One guy was run over and killed. And of course, there's Brian Terry, killed by a drug smuggler with an American gun from the Fast and Furious program that could be tracked back to the Fast and Furious program. So, there are so many reasons why we need borders. To protect the American people, to protect the people who are living below the border as well. This will be good for them. And already, just because Trump is in office, the number of border crossings have dropped by something like 50 or 60%. And why is that? Because people are worried they're going to get picked up and deported. They're more worried than they were before under Obama. Under Obama, it was people would be picked up and they put on a bus and then just take, well, where do you want to go? Well, they would just take them where they want to go, and that's it. It's over. You know, there is no, they're welcoming them. They're providing transportation for them. And these are not refugees. These are people who are trying to get a better job, a better paying job. And a lot of the immigrants who are here already, even the Hispanic people, are fed up with all the people trying to take their jobs. They get here, they get set up in getting a decent wage, and they start making an effort to get legal, and somebody else comes in and wants to work, and they'll work for less, and so they have no, the immigrants who are here already have no job protection at all. So the new immigrant just takes their job, so then they're stuck. They're in a mess. So it just can't go on indefinitely. We already have a huge problem with drugs and addiction in this country. Just devastating to everybody. It's reached up into the middle class now. The working class is devastated. The middle class is devastated. Even the children of very well-to-do upper middle class people are at risk in many, many areas, because apparently they're feeling hopeless. They're feeling like their prospects for a secure future are at risk. They want to feel better. The opportunity is there to take the drug, and they take the drug. And then they get addicted. And then they're stuck. It's very hard to get out of that cycle of addiction. It's a death spiral that just goes down, down, down. And your life is ruined. And is this what we want? And the answer is not to get rid of the drugs, but it would certainly help. I prefer the idea of legalization and just handing out the drugs from a secure place, a clinic. But again, I mean, that would be up to the government to decide that. I'm not sure how that would work, or even if it would work in this country. I know it worked apparently it has worked in Portugal. That's what I've read. I've heard that they legalized all drugs, and now drug use has actually gone down in Portugal. But I do think that one of the main reasons why people take drugs is because they're not enjoying their life. They want to feel good. They want to feel happy. They want to have that good feeling. And they don't have any useful work to give them that good feeling. So they resort to drugs or alcohol. Useful work can be almost anything that will give you some kind of a wage. It doesn't even have to be a great wage. You have to be able to live on it so you can live and keep working, keep your strength up. But something that people can feel good about, some kind of service job, something, building something, repairing something, maintaining something, whether it would be roads or bridges or maybe tree work or interior work, even cleaning houses. Of course, cleaning houses is actually a very well-paid job by today's standards. I mean, women or men who clean and are willing to do that and have regular customers do very well. But I think people, oftentimes, they are jaded and they're sort of brainwashed by the media into believing that those jobs are somehow beneath them. Even though they're good paying, they make them feel good, and people really appreciate their work. But they want to be a star. Well, they've been told their whole lives that they can be a star, whether it would be a music star, a TV star, a movie star, a sports star, but they want to be a star. That everybody wants to be a star. Well, I'm sorry. There isn't room enough in the world for everybody to be a star. It's just not going to happen. It's impossible. It could never happen. And people have to get real about that. And we need to understand that we can appreciate life and we can have a good life and even a better life than a star. Stars have problems too. They have big problems, just being a star. You know? I mean, when you're incredibly wealthy, can you really be sure that someone loves you for you? Or are they just after your money or your fame? And for some people, that is an issue. They can never truly be sure what the motivations of that person who says, "Oh, I love you so much." You know, is that really you they love? I remember an interview where someone was talking about Elvis Presley years ago, and he was talking to a girlfriend of his, and, "Oh, these people, they don't really love me." And she says, "What do you mean? You have millions of people who love you around the world." And he goes, "Yeah, but they really don't know me, the real me. They just have an idea, and they love that. That image, that's what they're..." So he wasn't quite satisfied with his role in the world and felt that it was kind of fake or phony, or it wasn't real, the adoration. He had the adoration of millions, but he really didn't appreciate it. And some people actually make fun of their fans, or they put them down, which is sad. But anyway, you know, just to talk a little bit more about Detroit, I've seen a lot of plans for Detroit. Nothing is, apparently, from my understanding, because I did talk to a city planner, nothing is set in concrete as of this moment. But what they're going to try to do is make it one of these sustainable cities of the future with these high-rise buildings that you have lofts or little apartments that are condos or they're leased. And that would be, I don't know, 10, 20 stories high. One of these towers. And then on the ground floor, you have retail businesses. Then on the floor above that, you have maybe offices, lawyers' offices, various offices, accountants, who knows, banks maybe. Then above that, you have the residential. And the whole idea is that people can live basically their whole life and almost never leave their building. They could buy clothes there, they could buy their groceries there. And my girlfriend and I were talking about it. It's a little bit like the idea of the company store, where you have to buy from the company store everything. Your whole life revolves around the company. And so they're fixing the prices, and you have to pay more. And it used to be in the old days that people were paid in the company script. The money that you used, that you were required to use, that you were paid in, was created by the company and could only be used in the stores run by the company. So you see, there's a continuous cycle here where you're giving them back the money that they gave you. And then, of course, the prices that you pay in the company store are higher because it's a closed system. There's no competition. And you're stuck. And you become a slave to the company. And there's even the old song about that, you know, deeper in debt, 10 tons, deeper in debt, I owe my soul to the company store. You all remember the old song. And this is exactly the way it was. You become a debt slave to the company. And this, I think, is what they're attempting to do in the future, is to bring back that system, which was very much dismantled, a lot of it. And how are they going to do that? They're going to do that by getting rid of the dollar. And you'll have cards that will be issued to you, currency cards. And guess where it's very likely you're going to be getting that currency card from. You'll get it from your company. Your company will provide you with that card. And you won't get cash when you're paid. Your wages will go to that bank account automatically. You won't even see that money. It'll just appear electronically in your account. And then when a company says that you owe them something, let's say whatever you bought from the company, food, clothing, would all be deducted. And they might have a way of deducting money from your account. Let's say if you're late, and there's all kinds of little ways that money can be deducted out of that account. There may even be a fee every time they electronically transfer those wages into your account. There's a fee that takes a little bit of those wages away because, well, it's a transfer fee or it's a deposit fee or something. Oh yeah, the bank needs to get their cut. So you see how they rob you. This is happening now for a lot of people. They get involved in this electronic world. But everything has a price. And it seems good. It seems like, oh, it's so easy. But it isn't. Like in our town, they're beginning to install not parking meters, but a wireless system that you dial into. You download an app and you simply pay electronically for your parking. But guess what? There's a fee for every time you use that app on your iPhone that the company gets, and they get like maybe 10%. So there's an extra fee, and that's another charge, another charge, another charge. And fortunately, they haven't installed those everywhere, and I don't want them to install them. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't even have an iPhone. And you're telling me that in order to park in my town, I'm going to have to get an iPhone just so I can conform to their electronic rip-off system? No, I shouldn't have to do that. And Americans at some point are going to have to just say no. They're going to have to not participate in this. And young people are going to have to realize that it is not better to go electronic. It is not better to go wireless. Cash is a better way to go. Cash is not that great, but it's better than paying unseen fees that nibble away at your wages. Everywhere you turn, there's going to be fees. We have to realize that we're being assaulted by multinational corporations that have no loyalty to the United States or to you. They're not your neighbor. They're not part of your town. They see you as a flesh and blood ATM machine, just a cash cow, just a source of revenue, period, for them. All they care about is getting money out of you. They could care less if you live or die. And this is the soulless, robotic machine mindset that we're seeing more and more manifesting in the world, around the world, with these multinational corporations. They're not directly involved with the human beings that they're ripping off, that they're exploiting, that they're literally killing. They're not directly involved, so they don't care. And that's the way a lot of people actually are. If they don't actually see it, if they don't see the suffering with their own eyes, or it's not someone who's related to them or they care about, they just don't care. Why should they? They think, I don't know that person. That's just the way it is. And this has nothing to do with party or conservative or liberal. This is just the mindset of people who have been raised this way. And they've gone to the Ivy League schools and they've been taught this. So we have to understand that if we want to keep control of our lives, we have to stand up, we have to turn away from this mechanization, this soulless, parasitical system. These are parasites. They don't create anything. They don't fix anything. They don't maintain anything. They get their joy from sucking your lifeblood out of you. That's where they get their satisfaction from. Seeing how much you will take before you actually rebel and turn on them. It's a very cowardly way of conquering people and getting control over people. So we have to become aware. We have to always question these so-called innovations. Is this progressive? Is this going to save the earth to replace coin-operated parking meters for electronic Wi-Fi gizmos that require an iPhone and an app and charge fees for every transaction? You can see how much of a moneymaker, extra moneymaker this is. Is this progress? Is this the kind of progress that we want? Are we willing to put up with this? This is just one example. And there are so many other places where the human factor is simply being pushed aside completely. I mean, we may reach a time where you go to the grocery store and there is no one in that grocery store except robots. Robots loading shelves with food, robotic counter checkers that essentially you have to do it yourself. I mean, we used to have people and they would have jobs and they would pack your groceries for you. No more. No more packing of groceries. Do it yourself. Do they give you a discount for packing your own groceries? No. No discount. Price the same. And so, is this what humans have to look forward to in the future? Or how about this? Don't even go to the store at all, but just get on your iPhone and select the food that you want. And then once you have your food selected, you press a button and it's sent electronically. Your order is sent electronically to the grocery store. The robot selects the food, puts it on a drone robot, another robot. The drone lifts it up and carries it and it deposits it on your front steps, the food on your front steps. So you never have to leave your house. You can just sit at home all day and do what? I don't know. Just fall apart, just gradually melt into a puddle of protoplasm on your couch. You know, is this the future? Is this progress? Is this progressive? Is this somehow better? And how about the article that I heard on NPR, I think it was just this morning. The inventor was very excited about how we can put microphones in everything now. In everything. Your electric drill that you buy, just an ordinary drill, electric drill, you know, use it to drive screws or drill holes in wood, that would have a microphone in it. And he says, yeah, because that could be tuned in and we could tell when we're putting too much of a strain by the sound that the drill makes, and the microphone would pick that up. And the person who's doing the article says, oh, don't worry, they wouldn't listen to everything we say, only certain things, only key words would be recorded. Oh, really? That's what they told us about our emails and our telephone calls, that not everything was recorded, only certain things. But no, it turned out that everything indeed was recorded. That they have enormous buildings filled with supercomputers, tremendous energy hogs, you know, using all this energy to record everything. And then after they record everything, then they use search engines and with keywords to look for the items of interest, messages of interest, conversations of interest. But who's to say what those messages of interest are? How much money is to be made by knowing everything you say, not just online, but knowing everything you say in the privacy of your own bedroom, of your own kitchen, of your own living room, of your basement, of your bedroom, of your attic, of your yard? Because they want to put these microphones in everything. They want microphones in street lights. I'm sure that probably these electronic parking meters have microphones in them. The cars have microphones in them. Of course, the iPhone has a microphone, the television, the washing machine, the refrigerator. And it appears that these microphones, these modern microphones, only cost about a nickel to make. That's what they said. 5 cents. How could that be? I don't see how that could be, but that's what he said. 5 cents to make a microphone. Probably made by robots. Really tiny, and yet it works. Oh, don't worry. We won't record everything you say. Is this the future? Is this progressive? And yet people feel like we cannot say no. We cannot say no. It's inevitable. It's the future. It's set in stone. If we can do it, we have to do it. If we can do it. If it's possible to do it, we have to do it. And there's really no turning back. And that's what a guy told me at one time about globalism. Oh, you can't turn that around, he says. You can't stop globalism. It's a done deal. Oh, really? Since when is anything a done deal? Set in concrete? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. Yeah, I'm sure Rome thought they were going to last forever. I mean, even Hitler thought they were going to have the 1,000-year Reich. How long did it last? Like 12 years, maybe? Not 1,000, 12. But it's the understanding that people need. The people need to know when they're being exploited and say no and resist. You talk about resistance. People say, oh, we have to resist Trump. Well, there's plenty to resist in this world. Plenty to resist. But one thing we should keep is our ability to vote for whomever we want as the American people. We don't want to undermine the rule of law that says this person is our president. Because that means that sets a precedent. That means that anybody you don't like, believe me, once you allow you ignore or breach the rule of law because it benefits you, that very same breach can be used against you, and it will be. It's inevitable. It will turn around, and you will regret it later because it will turn back on you. The other side can do the same thing. They will feel justified in doing the same thing to you at some point down the road. And the problem is that people want the gratification, the instant gratification right now. They're not willing to wait for the political process to turn or to re-examine their own values and their own motivations and their own understanding of how the world works, to truly see what their failings might do. Why are the people not listening to us? Where are we failing? Maybe we're a little bit too smug, a little too self-satisfied, a little too sure of ourselves that we are in the right. That we want a borderless world. Just use that as an example. A borderless world. Is that wonderful? Or is it not? Not necessarily. Because who will run that borderless world? Who will be in charge? Somebody has to be in charge of a borderless world. There has to be an emperor or a president, but someone with unprecedented power, or a group. Okay, we'll say, well, why does it have to be one man? Well, it could be a group, but somebody's got to be the chairman of that board of directors of the world. Like the EU. You know, these people, they have the European Parliament, which gives the veneer of democracy, except there's only one problem with that. The European Parliament has virtually no power. They cannot propose laws, they cannot pass laws, they cannot veto laws. They talk about it, but they can't stop it, they can't change it. It's the European Commission, a small group of unelected men who actually propose, veto, pass. They're the ones that create. And they're not beholden to the people of Europe at all. So it's a veneer of democracy, but it's not actually democracy, it's tyranny already happening in the European Union. They want to bring that here to the United States, borderless. Get rid of the United States, merge it with Mexico and Canada. That's just the beginning. One giant superstate, North American continent. And who's going to run it? Who knows? So that's all there is today. Have a great weekend and sleep well.